How does a massive political alliance representing, millions of voters and four major presidential heavyweights completely collapse in a single day?
Right, and not even at the ballot box.
Exactly. Not at the ballot box, not in a televised debate, but literally because of a single missing piece of paper in a courtroom.
It is wild to think about.
It really is. Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are exploring the incredibly high-stakes battle for the African Democratic Congress, the ADC, and their presidential ticket ahead of the 2027 elections.
Which is shaping up to be quite the chess match.
Oh, absolutely. So we're synthesizing reports today from The Nation, Daily Post, Sahara Reporters, The Guardian, and a really pivotal April 15th, 2026 interview on Arise Television.
Yeah, that interview gave us a lot to work with.
It really did. And our mission today is to map out the three intersecting dimensions of this story. We've got former Vice President Atiku Abubakar's historic final bid for the presidency. We have the fierce internal competition that is just tearing at the seams of the ADC coalition. And then there's this ticking legal time bomb that could literally destroy the opposition's chances before a single vote is even cast.
That legal aspect is just fascinating.
It changes everything. So whether you are a complete political junkie or you're just, fascinated by the raw mechanics of power and ambition, stick with us. This deep dive will show you exactly how fragile political coalitions actually are.
Yeah, to really understand the strategy driving this coalition, we have to start with the man whose gravity is sort of distorting the entire political landscape right now.
We really do. We're looking at a deeply complex scenario where individual legacy is just colliding directly with the urgent needs of a massive political alliance.
Definitely.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with Atiku Abubakar.
Yeah, the man at the center of the storm.
Exactly. So on April 15th, 2026, he goes on Arise Television's primetime program and makes this incredibly definitive declaration. He states clearly that 2027 will be his absolute last outing.
His final run.
Yes. He is unequivocally done after this. And to truly grasp the weight of that statement, we have to look at the sheer historical scale of his persistence.
The timeline of his presidential ambition is practically unprecedented in Nigerian democratic history. It really is.
Yeah.
If he runs in 2027, it marks his 7th attempt overall at securing the highest office.
Wow.
And his 4th time actually appearing on a general election ballot. His pursuit spans over 3 decades.
You look at that timeline, and it paints a picture of just incredible endurance. Like, he first entered the Social Democratic Party, the SDP, their presidential primaries, way back in 1993.
Right, going up against Moshe Dabayola.
Exactly, and eventually losing to him. Then, he runs on the Action Congress platform in 2007. He lost the People's Democratic Party, the PDP, primaries in 2011.
Then he joined the All Progressives Congress, the APC, and lost their primaries ahead of 2015.
Right. And then he returns to the PDP and loses the 2019 general election to incumbent Muhammadu Buhari. And then he secures the PDP ticket yet again in 2022, only to come in second in the 2023 election.
Losing to Bola Tinubu.
Yeah. It's just a staggering list. But I have to ask, at what point does sheer persistence transition from being an inspiring asset to, an electoral liability? Like an athlete who just keeps coming out of retirement?
Well, that is the exact debate happening right now. This declaration of finality fundamentally changes the political calculus. For his core supporters, it's this powerful redemption arc.
Yeah.
One last ride. But for critics, it's just a worn-out narrative.
Right.
And we have to remember, he turns 80 in November 2026.
Which would make him the oldest major presidential aspirant in Nigerian democratic history.
Exactly. And the critical missing piece that he has yet to address is, at 80 years old, what is his concrete plan for succession?
Right, like who is coming after him?
Yeah, what is his plan for leadership development? Without a clear succession plan, the broader coalition views his candidacy as more of a short-term gamble rather than a long-term strategy for the country.
But his rationale, if you listen to that interview, he claims Nigeria's fundamental issue is leadership. And he's positioning his VP experience under Obasanjo as just vital for this moment.
Yeah, he is. He's leaning heavily into that.
And he didn't hold back on the current administration either. He called President Tinubu a very bad president, and honestly, the worst in his lifetime.
Which is incredibly strong language.
Very. He was warning of weakening democratic institutions.
Yeah.
Oh, and he also used that interview to completely dismiss all corruption allegations against him as politically motivated and totally unproven.
Right. And just as a quick reminder for you listening, we are analyzing these statements neutrally. We're looking at them strictly as part of the political landscape, not, endorsing them.
Exactly, yes. We're just looking at how he's utilizing this intense criticism to elevate the stakes of the 2027 election.
And by framing the country's situation as so dire, he's basically attempting to make his vast experience seem like an absolute necessity.
Right, rather than a relic of the past.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Despite all of this elder statesman status, Atiku isn't exactly walking into a coronation here.
Oh, not at all.
To even get to the general election, he has to survive a heavily crowded room within the ADC coalition. And that leads to a massive political concession.
Because the structural dynamics within the ADC have shifted dramatically, haven't they?
Completely. I mean, you have 4 heavyweights vying for this ticket. You've got Atiku, obviously.
Right.
Then you have Peter Obi, who defected from the Labour Party in December 2025, bringing along several prominent Southeast leaders.
And Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso bringing his massive NNPP base from Kano and Northwest.
Right. And then you also have Rotimi Amaechi in the mix.
It is a delicate puzzle of electoral math. You have all these massive egos and regional power bases.
Which is exactly why former Senate President Aminu Tambuwal had to make a direct plea at the ADC convention. He literally begged these 4 men to prioritize unity over individual ambition.
Yeah, the tension was palpable. The party strategists know that if they fracture, the ruling APC will just sweep the election.
And that plea actually led to Atiku making a huge headline-generating concession. He said he is willing to accept a consensus candidate.
Wait, really?
Yeah, he said he would step aside for anyone who wins the ticket, including Peter Obi, who was actually his running mate back in 2019. Atiku's exact quote was, "There was nothing difficult about democratic process."
What's fascinating here is the regional chess game playing out underneath that statement.
Right. Break that down for us.
So you have this viral momentum on social media championing an Obi-Kwankwaso ticket. Proponents argue that an Obi-Kwankwaso pairing offers way more electoral credibility, especially with the youth vote, than an Atiku-led ticket.
Because of the age factor and the previous runs?
Exactly. But on the flip side, you have people arguing that the coalition desperately needs Atiku's northeast political capital to actually defeat the APC.
So it's this geographic balancing act. But I have to say, it's easy to say we'll agree on one name. But what happens when 3 titans have to swallow their pride?
That is the multi-million-dollar question.
Right? Like, what is the actual mechanism to enforce that agreement if one of them simply says, "No, I won't step aside"? Feels like a corporate merger without a binding contract.
That's a great way to put it. And the truth is, there really isn't a strict enforcement mechanism. It relies entirely on voluntary compliance.
Which in politics as well, it's rare.
Very rare. And if that consensus fails, a contested primary could fracture the coalition instantly.
Because the losers just leave.
Exactly. We saw reports from The Guardian in early April 2026 showing that losing contenders might just flee to fallback platforms like the New Democratic Congress, the NDC, or even go back to the APC.
So they are trying to build this massive coalition while simultaneously keeping an eye on the emergency exits.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing.
But wait, let's pivot, because the ultimate irony here is that arguing over who gets to fly the plane doesn't matter at all if the plane is legally grounded.
Oh, this is the legal time bomb you mentioned.
Yes, we have to move from the internal party politics to the cold, hard, legal realities of the Electoral Act.
Because the clock is ticking loudly.
Very loudly. So what does this all mean? They're essentially fighting over who gets to drive a car while the engine is currently being dismantled in a courtroom.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the ADC's biggest immediate challenge isn't actually political at all. It's entirely structural.
Explain the timeline for us, because it is brutally short.
It really is. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, enforces a strict window for party primaries. That window opens on April 23, 2026.
Which is just 1 week from right now, based on our current timing.
Exactly, just 1 week. And it runs through May 30.
Okay, so they have barely a month.
Right. And the Electoral Act 2026 requires parties to use either consensus or direct primaries. The ADC's own spokesman, Balaji Abdullahi, confirmed that indirect primaries are officially out.
Okay, so indirect is out, meaning they can't just have a small group of delegates vote in a closed room.
No, they cannot.
They either have to miraculously agree on one person, which we just discussed is incredibly fragile, or they have to hold a direct primary, meaning millions of party members nationwide have to cast a ballot within a fractured party.
Under a 1-month deadline.
That is an absolute logistical nightmare.
It is. But honestly, the logistics aren't even the scariest part for the ADC. It's the existential risk of their leadership dispute.
Ah, yes, the Supreme Court hearing.
Right. So there is this looming April 22 Supreme Court hearing regarding a dispute over who actually legally leads the ADC.
Okay, so the day before the primary window opens, they are in court figuring out who is actually in charge of the party.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. If the Supreme Court doesn't resolve the dispute by April 22, which is highly unlikely given the pace of the courts, INEC will simply not oversee the primary.
Wait, really? They just won't show up?
They won't. They cannot legally monitor a primary run by a disputed executive body.
So let me get this straight. Even if Atiku, Obi, Kwankwaso, and Amaechi somehow agree on a candidate, if INEC isn't there to monitor the process because of this court case, what happens?
Well, any primary held without INC monitoring risks being completely invalidated by an election tribunal later on.
Oh, wow. So a judge could just erase the entire primary process with a single ruling?
Yes, exactly. All that campaigning, all those rallies, all those millions of votes completely thrown out on the legal technicality.
That is just, I'm speechless. Can a legally disputed party even host a valid primary at that point?
Legally, it's incredibly risky, and it raises a massive question: what happens to the huge voter bases of Obi and Kwankwaso if the ADC collapses on a legal technicality? Where do those millions of voters go?
They'll probably just scatter. Or worse, they just get apathetic and don't vote at all.
Exactly. The political energy just dissolves.
Man, this is why this deep dive matters so much to your understanding of how the world actually works.
It really is.
Because this isn't just about Nigerian politics, right? This is a masterclass in the universal tension between individual ambition, the necessity of coalition building, and the rigid, unyielding nature of the law.
Absolutely.
It proves that being well-informed requires looking past the really loud personalities on the stage to see the quiet structural rules that actually govern power behind the scenes.
It does. And I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought to sort of mull over on your own.
Oh, I like this. Go for it.
If a massive national opposition coalition, an alliance representing millions of energized voters, can have its entire existence threatened by a single delayed Supreme Court ruling the day before a deadline,
Yeah.
what does that say about where true democratic power really lies? I mean, is the future of a democracy actually determined at the ballot box by the people, or is it ultimately decided by the gavels of the judiciary?
That is such a heavy question, but so incredibly relevant. It really makes you rethink how campaigns actually function.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this journey through the ADC's political maze. Keep questioning the systems around you, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.